morning, everybody. We will call the work session for August 3rd, 2020 to order. I have to read a quick disclaimer because we are on Zoom again. To ensure public safety and comply with the governor's Safer at Home order in response to the COVID-19 virus, the Clearwater City Council will hold a public meeting on Monday, August 3rd, 2020 at 9 a.m. using communications media technology. Pursuant to Executive Order number 20-69, issued by the Office of Governor Ron DeSantis on March 20th, 2020, municipalities may conduct meetings of their governing boards without having a quorum of its members present physically or at any specific location, and utilizing communications media technologies such as telephonic or video conferencing, as provided by Section 120.545B2 Florida statutes. The meeting will be held through the Zoom platform and will be broadcast live on the city's website, https://www.myclearwater.com/government/council-meeting-streaming-videos. On Facebook at www.facebook.com/City of Clearwater, and on YouTube at www.youtube.com/myclearwater, as well as the following public access TV channels: Spectrum Channel 638, Frontier Channel 30, and WOW Channel 15. Individuals with disabilities who need reasonable accommodations to effectively participate in this meeting are asked to contact the city clerk at 727-562-4092 or at rosemarie.call@myclearwater.com in advance. With that, we will move to item 2.1.
Good morning, Mayor and Council. The first item is comprehensive annual report for fiscal year 2019. This will be presented by Ms. Monica Mitchell.
Good morning. I'm Monica Mitchell, Assistant Finance Director. This agenda item is for the presentation of our annual audit for the fiscal year ending September 30th, 2019. Although this presentation has been delayed, I want you to know that the audit was completed on time and all required filings were made before the original deadlines without utilizing any of the extensions available to us due to COVID-19. As always, I want to thank all of the staff that contribute to this process each year in the Finance Department and throughout the city. Their hard work is critical to the completion of this audit on a timely basis. This is the final year of our contract with Cherry Bekaert, so I also want to thank our auditors for their advice and assistance. They've guided us through implementation of several new accounting standards, as well as changes to accounting practices when we converted to our new financial management software 2 years ago. Their attention to detail has improved our comprehensive annual financial report each year. With that, I'll turn this over to John Gilberto and Lauren Strope from Cherry Bekaert.
Thank you very much. I hope you're all doing well this morning. And as you just heard Monica said, we have been your auditor for the last 5 years, and this is the last presentation you will see from us this year as you change auditors for the next couple of years. And hopefully you'll see us back in another 5 years. We truly want to thank you for the opportunity to work with you the last 5 years. We came away at the end of this 5 years knowing more, working with your staff. They've done an excellent job and are very highly competent, and we very much enjoyed working with them. So with that, we're going to go into our presentation. This is a summary of the timing, the results, and the nature of what happened during the audit process and the results of our audit. We did have a very thorough meeting with the audit committee, so we thank the audit committee for their time and service and letting us go through a very detailed approach of our audit. So this is kind of a high-level summary. We have completed our audit and issued our reports dated March 26, 2020 for your fiscal year ending September 30th, 2019. That report covers all of your funds. We audit each fund, so our opinion covers each individual fund that you have and the footnotes. We're required to follow a couple of different audit standards. The first one being the GAS, which is the Generally Accepted Auditing Standards, and then another GAS, the Governmental Auditing Standards, and then we have to follow the Uniform Grant from the federal government for federal grants, and Chapter 10-550 Rules of the Auditor General for several different things, an examination of local investment policies, and also for your state grants. I'm going to turn it over to Laura now to go through the results and what our opinions mean and what our ending opinions said. Next page, please.
Good morning. So the summary of deliverables, with everything that John mentioned, all the standards that we follow, these are the various reports that we issue on your CAFR. So the first one is the audit opinion, or the opinion that essentially says that your financial statements are free from all material misstatement. We issued an unmodified opinion, which is the highest level of assurance that we as your external auditors can provide to you. It's a clean opinion, and it used to be called an unqualified opinion. We also issued our report on internal control over financial reporting and on compliance. That's for government auditing standards. That was a no comment letter. Had we found a significant deficiency or a material weakness, it would have been disclosed in that particular letter. We also issue a report on compliance for each major program and on internal control over compliance. That is for the Uniform Grant Guidance for your federal grants and for the Chapter 10.550 for your state grants. There we issued an unmodified opinion as well. Again, that is the highest level of assurance, and that's a clean opinion. The Auditor General of the state of Florida requires us to issue a management letter. We issued a no comment letter. Had there been something that we needed to comment on, that would mean that there was an issue with what the Auditor General was saying that the city needed to comply with. And so that was a no comment, or again, a clean opinion. John mentioned that we have an investment exam. For that, we issued the report on compliance with local investment policies. Again, an unmodified or clean opinion. There's always a schedule of findings and question costs, which some people find a little odd, especially when you don't have any findings or question costs. But in that letter, we did disclose that there were none. Other reports not included in the CAFR, we do issue a report on the schedules of revenues and expenditures related to emergency medical services. And that has to do with Pinellas County and some of the requirements that they had. And that was a clean report as well. We could switch to the very last slide. Real quick, if you are ever curious as to what management has chosen or any accounting policies that they have that end up going into the numbers of your CAFR, all of those can be found in Note 1 to the financial statements. We found everything to be in accordance with accounting principles generally accepted in the United States of America and consistent with industry practices and standards. This year, you did adopt 2 new GASBs. One was for continuing debt obligations, and the others was for disclosures related to debt. All that these standards did was increase disclosure in the financial statement footnotes. They did not change the face financials or result in a restatement, as you've seen in the last couple of years, like with pension and OPEB. In the next couple of years coming down the pipeline, you have GASB 84 related fiduciary activities and 87 related to leases. Management's very active in looking through this, and I know for leases, they've already gone through quite a few things. But those are some big changes that you'll see in the next couple of years in your financial statements. In the previous year, significant or unusual transactions or presentations, we always just have single audit compliance here, just because, as you all know, those federal and state dollars you get have a lot of strings attached and a lot of compliance requirements that management has to ensure are met. So that's always kind of a trickier area to audit. But again, we issued clean opinions and did not have any issues. And on the very last slide, if you have any questions, we are pleased to take them now. And if not, here's our contact information if you think of anything in the future that you need to ask us. But I would like to thank management, because they've just been a pleasure to work with. Everything that we've ever asked them for, they've been able to provide. So again, great audit all the way around, and we'd love to answer any questions you might have.
Thank you, Lauren. First of all, I want to congratulate the staff on it really is an incredibly clean audit for as large an organization as the city of Clearwater is, and also for getting the Certificate of Achievement in Financial Reporting. That is also a great honor to the city and the way that they do business. And I want to thank Cherry Beckard Howland, because they do have a great reputation. I know the staff is sorry to see them go, but as policy, we change auditors. We did go through, I am on that audit committee, so we did go through an RFP and have picked someone, which that will be disclosed soon. But I want to thank John and Lauren for all their hard work, and we hope to see them down the road. With that, are there any questions from the council? Councilmember Beckman. I am not hearing you, Councilmember Beckman. And you aren't muted, but I'm not hearing you. Are your earphones plugged in? Into the computer. Check that connection. No. We'll get somebody over to your office. Are there questions from any of the other council members?
Can you hear?
Yes.
Oh, good. Okay, good. Okay. Well, I think the first question I had was why were we switching out this auditing for? But I guess if it's policy to switch it out every other contract or something, every 5 years.
It is common for you to switch auditors because you do not want the audit staff to get too comfortable with the city staff.
Mm-hmm.
Plus, it gets a new set of eyes on all of the books. It's a control that most banks and other organizations follow.
Okay, that makes sense to me. So is it about every 5 years? Is that what we do?
It is.
Okay. And then I just had a question on the page that says, I think it was the second slide where we're talking about the highest level of the opinions about no comment, and that meant clean. But I'm wondering, is there an option to put the wording that meant unmodified instead of no comment? I mean, did they find anything at all, or just nothing significant? Are those two interchangeable? That's what I had a question on.
Don, Lauren, one of you want to grab that?
Yeah, I'll be happy to. Lauren, I'll start. On the ones that have the internal control, we do not opine on internal control. No auditor does. So it won't be, and it will never be an unmodified report or a modified report for an internal control type report. The comments would be anything that is a material weakness or a significant deficiency, which is where your controls are not working to catch an error, a material error or fraud in a timely manner during the normal course of business. We did not note any of those during our audit and our audit process. So that's why it's a no comment report. Anything below that level, which would be a control deficiency, which would be a deficiency in internal controls that may not be as material as a significant deficiency or material weakness, would go into the management letter. We didn't notice anything this year that we had a report in the management letter that we needed to go to you, that would go to the state of Florida. In the past, every once in a while, there has been one or two that you'll see. I think 2 years ago, there was one material weakness on the financial statements or on the single audit, but this year there was no comments that we noted that we had to address to you. And that's why we use the word no comment instead of unmodified, because we're not opining on internal controls.
Okay. Okay. That's what I thought was going on. Thank you. Thank you very much.
No problem.
The questions or comments? Well, John, Lauren, again, thank you very much. We appreciate all that you've done for us, and we're still going to be talking about that. So on to 3.1.
Approve the current coronavirus relief fund sub-recipient agreement between the Florida Housing Finance Corporation and the City of Clearwater, and authorize the appropriate officials to execute same. Mr. Lane.
Thank you, Chuck Lane, Economic Development and Housing Department. As you all know, Pinellas County received a substantial allocation of federal CARES funding early on in the pandemic. One of the primary programs they created to distribute these funds is the Pinellas CARES Financial Assistance Program for residents. When they started the program, county staff estimated spending upwards of $30 million on rent, mortgage, and utility assistance to households having lost income due to the pandemic. This program is available to qualifying Clearwater residents. When the county started the program, they established a maximum household income level as a qualifying criteria. the city's Economic Development and Housing Department stood up a much smaller program designed to complement the county's program. We set guidelines that would allow us to serve a small number of households whose income exceeded the county's threshold up to an income level that our funding source allowed. The county later eliminated the maximum income criteria, so we put our program on pause as to not compete with a program that was already serving Clearwater residents and was fully funded. So now the playing field has changed. You're all aware that Governor Ron DeSantis line item vetoed the statewide formula distribution for State Housing Initiative Partnership Program funding intended for local governments. In an effort to somewhat offset that action, the Florida Housing Finance Corporation is distributing $75 million of federal CARES money through the SHIP distribution network to help address COVID-19 impacts. It's called the Coronavirus Relief Fund. We are to receive $375,576. We are limited as to how we can spend this money. Any funds not spent by December 31st will have to be returned. We will use 10% of the funding on administrative activities, and the remainder of the funding will be used to address COVID-19 impacts with the following activities. Rent assistance payments, including back rent deposits and utilities payments, mortgage payments, and of course, utilities payments, assistance to homeowners to pay insurance deductibles, housing reentry assistance such as security deposits, temporary storage of household furnishings, utility deposits, foreclosure or eviction prevention, which we already provide through one of our programs, and homeowner counseling, which we already provide. Qualifying households must have an income at or below 120% of area median income. We will set a maximum of $5,000 benefit per household, which is the same as the county's maximum. Our recent experience indicates that the more typical request is in the $2,000 to $3,000 range. So our best estimate is that we'll be able to serve somewhere around 135 residents. We will process applications on a first come, first served basis until the funds are completed. So before we set up our program, so a Clearwater resident would be eligible for the county's program or ours, but not both. Now there are Clearwater residents that will be eligible for both programs. We've coordinated with county staff so that we have a way to check their database of people served. So we're not paying the same rent payment, for example, as they are paying or plan to pay or have paid. We have to be careful of duplication of benefits. So we'll begin taking applications on August 13th. On Friday this week, we will post information on the affordable housing webpage at myclearwater.com/RMU assistance. Beginning on August 13th, that same website will contain a link to submit an application on a web-based system. We encourage those needing assistance to apply. I'll take questions, please.
Any questions for Mr. Lane? Chuck, just two things. First of all, it's a great program, and we certainly want to keep people in their homes. Is the 10% going to be adequate to cover your administrative needs?
I think so. It's a program we should be able to manage. 10% is really pretty typical for the programs that we manage and the funds that we manage. So I think we're in pretty good shape with that.
And do we have duplication? Is that a big problem, do you think?
It's something that's one of the challenges with the federal money that's being distributed. We have to be very careful not to duplicate benefits. The state has given us a form that we will have an applicant fill out. And under this program, that form should be adequate to cover us to ensure that we're not duplicating benefits. We're actually going above the requirements that are given to us by checking with the county to make sure that someone we're funding isn't on their database of people that they've served.
Okay, so we are communicating back and forth.
Yes, we are.
Okay, well, thank you for the one-on-ones you had with the entire council. Any further questions? Consent?
Consent.
Okay, 4.1.
Sorry. Approve a utility work by highway contractor agreement with the State of Florida Department of Transportation to remove natural gas mains during a road improvement project on US Highway 19 at an estimated cost of $10,350.74, and authorize the appropriate officials to execute same. Mr. Langill.
Good morning, Brian Lingill, Assistant Director for Clearwater Gas System. This is a road construction project up in Tarpon Springs, US Highway 19 for some drainage improvements. And we have approximately 440 feet of gas main that needs to be removed as part of that project. And so we are asking for your approval to move forward with the DOT and their subcontractor to do that work. Having them do that work prevents us from causing any type of delays with scheduling conflicts. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Questions for Mr. Langell, Vice Mayor?
Yeah, I find it unusual that you have an estimated cost of $10,350.74. I mean, is that a not to exceed number? Is that a contract amount? Because it seems like you just say around 10,000 estimated cost.
Well, it's the engineering estimate that the contractor provides us. It's a lump sum amount, so we pay that amount, and there's no true ups or anything like that after the contract is over the project. Typically, on the larger dollar amounts, they would not be a lump sum, and we would, after the project is done, after a year or two, we would see monies come back to us because they're estimated dollar amounts.
Okay, so it's if you have a lump sum amount, I mean, it could be less than that, or could there be some things that we don't know about that could actually happen that would raise it?
Yeah, it could be less than that. So they're more than likely estimating a little on the higher side for that, for that work. It comes out to about $23 a foot for the removal of that pipe.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Councilmember Hamilton.
Yeah, I'm just kind of wondering, in the overall picture, $10,000 is a fairly small number. My question is, why is this required to come to us? Why? I know the city manager has the ability to approve things under $100,000 in most instances, a lot of instances. Why shouldn't I mean, gas is kind of its own business. Is there a reason that gas management doesn't have the ability to approve this without us?
Yeah, the agreement, it's a standard DOT utility work highway agreement, but it does have indemnification language in it that's on page 3. And so that's just standard language, nothing unique in this particular situation, but legal reviews that, and any time that there's any type of language like that in there where there's hold harmless language to DOT, we have to take it to you for approval, regardless of the dollar amount.
Okay.
Other questions or comments? Consent?
Yeah.
4.2.
Authorize award of invitation to bid 25-20 natural gas meters and regulators to DevTech Sales, Inc. of Avon Park, Florida, Equipment Controls Company of Norcross, Georgia, and Gemtech, Inc. of Palm Bay, Florida, for an annual not to exceed amount of $1,500,000, effective 1 August 2020 through July 31st, 2021, with the option for 2 one-year term extensions, and authorize the appropriate officials to execute the same. Mr. Langell again.
Yes, thank you. This is the bid that allows us to purchase our gas meters and regulators to serve our customers, the meter that's on the side of the structure of the house and the commercial establishment. We sent out this bid, and we got 3 vendors that responded to the bid, and we picked the appropriate line items where they came in the lowest and most effective bid to meet all of our operational needs. So we're requesting that DevTech be awarded 1.275 in the breakdown, and then Equipment Controls will be at 40,000, and JEM Tech would be at 185,000, and DevTech is the commercial, the residential gas meters. Equipment Controls is going to supply us with commercial grade regulators for those meters, and Gemtech is doing the commercial gas meters.
Questions for Mr. Langell? Consent?
Yes.
Item 5.1.
Approve First Amendment to the Capital Project Funding Agreement between the city and Pinellas County Tourist Development Council to extend the terms of the agreement to allow for reimbursement of funds during fiscal years 2020 and 2021, and authorize the appropriate officials to execute same. Mr. Cater.
Morning, Mayor, council members. On October 2nd, 2017, the city was awarded a grant from the TDC for $1.9 million for renovations to the Countryside Sports Complex. Some of the council members may be aware and were present at the dedication of the building that was actually this year in early March. For the building was consisted of a new press box, restrooms, concession stand, and it was very well received. We've not been able to use a whole lot of it yet because we're not through with phase 2, which the construction is underway now, which is the removal of the old buildings and the expansion of the northeastern field, as well as some drainage improvements and the final lighting improvements to the stadium field. The purpose of this amendment is to allow the city to request reimbursement of the grant funds in fiscal year 20 and in 21, rather than in fiscal year 18 and 19 as per the agreement. I'm available to answer any questions you might have.
Any questions for Mr. Cater? Art, I just want to thank you, and I want to thank the partnership with the TDC. This is an example of how some of the bed tax dollars that are paid by our tourists come back to the cities and help our residents with improved facilities, and also helps with sports tourism. But it is a great partnership. They're going to be a little stretched for the next year because that bed tax isn't coming in at the same rate, but we do appreciate them and you. So consent?
Yes.
All right, item 5.2.
Approve a management agreement between the city of Clearwater and the Clearwater Community Sailing Center Association, Inc. for use of the building and properly located at 1001 Gulf Boulevard from August 1, 2020 through February 29, 2024, and authorize the appropriate officials to execute same. Mr. Cater again.
Staff recommends that this management agreement with the Sailing Center Association, which is a 501c3 organization, nonprofit organization, to manage the Sailing Center. The city and the Sailing Center Association have been in a relationship actually since 2002, when they had an agreement with the city to basically take over the Sailing Center. The Sailing Center provides local residents with sailing opportunities, classes, boat rentals, and one of the things that I like is they have a special needs program that they offer for special needs children to go and adults to learn how to sail. Just a historical perspective, the city Parks and Recreation Department actually constructed the Sailing Center in 1991, and the city operated it for the Marina Division. Basically was turned over to them, and they operated it for the next 10 years with 2 full-time equivalent employees. That was it. And basically what happened was in 2002, the Sailing Center Association came along and said, you know, we really would like to partner with you and operate the Sailing Center. We believe we can add the programming and things that are necessary to really make it a first-class facility. And so in 2002, they began the operations there. As you can see from some of the attachments that you might have, they have a budget now over $500,000 and $500,000 of revenue they're taking in. When we gave it up, the budget was not even quite $200,000. The city will be responsible for the maintenance of the CIP repairs. Those are the large items that we would repair, the buildings and the structures. And then the Sailing Center is responsible for all the day-to-day maintenance and all the day-to-day programming. The city will receive a rent of $1,459.33, or what I like to say is $17,500 per year. With that, I'm available to answer any questions you might have.
Any questions for Mr. Cater? Councilmember Beckman and then the Vice Mayor.
I had a question about some of the language in the document, and you kind of used it here when you you said it's has services for local residents. You mean all residents of the city, correct? Have access to that?
I apologize. Yes,
Yeah.
it's all residents. Actually, many of the sailing center communities are not on Tampa, St. Pete, and again, the city of Clearwater, and also visitors to Clearwater. There's an awful lot of people that come here for sailing tournaments, and also people that actually come to the hotels on the beach and like to come out and sail. So you are correct. I apologize.
Okay, no, I just wanted to make sure that was clear. And then, do our Clearwater residents get a discount when they rent those little sailing boats and things there?
You know, I am not sure of that. I can
Okay.
certainly get back to you on that.
That's okay. Thanks. I can check into that too.
Okay.
Vice Mayor?
Yeah, I just want to make a comment. You know, it's a world-class sailing center. We've got a lot of champions that come out of that. And if people don't really realize how big this program is, I'm a boater. And when I go out on the weekends and I see the amount of sailboats that kids are grouped together and come out of there, I'm really proud of that we have that with the city of Clearwater. So I'm glad we partnered with somebody that's very successful, and I'm glad that's moving on in the future. So,
Other questions or comments? Yeah, to your statement, Vice Mayor, Paige and Zach Raley both were Olympians that came out of that facility, and Congressman Young back in the day helped us get that money for the accessibility program. And I think it's also worth pointing out that, you know, this is a city facility, but they're getting donations every year in excess of $50,000. And, you know, the Clearwater Yacht Club has been a wonderful partner in helping with the sailing center. So it's a perfect example of a private-public partnership. So we thank them. Consent?
Mm-hmm.
All right, item 6.1.
Ratify and confirm a memorandum of agreement between Bob Walteri as Sheriff of Pinellas County, Florida, City of St. Petersburg Police Department, the City of Clearwater Police Department, and the City of Pinellas Park Police Department to create a use of deadly force investigative task force and authorize the appropriate officials to execute same. Chief Slaughter.
Chief Daniel Slaughter with the Police Department. Good morning, Council and Mayor. I like to discuss the item this morning, which is an effort to increase transparency and ensure some impartial investigations during deadly force incidents. The Police Department is requesting the Council ratify and confirm a memorandum of agreement between the Police Department, Pinellas County Sheriff's Department, St. Petersburg Police Department, and the Pinellas Park Police Department. This would create the Pinellas County Use of Deadly Force Investigative Task Force. Under this agreement, the Clearwater Police Department and all the other party agencies would supply experienced homicide investigators to the task force based on where an incident of deadly force is used by a police officer. Based on that location, the lead agency and the officers that are not involved with or not affiliated with the agency involved in deadly force would be responsible for investigating the incident. For example, if a Pinellas County Sheriff's deputy were to use deadly force north of Palmerton Road, the Clearwater Police Department would be the lead agency and would comprise an investigative team from the Clearwater Police Department, the St. Petersburg Police Department, and the Pinellas Park Police Department. In turn, if a Clearwater police officer were to use deadly force in the city of Clearwater, the lead agency would be the Pinellas County Sheriff's Department, and the Clearwater detectives would be recused from the investigation, and the team that would investigate that incident would be the St. Petersburg Police Department, the detectives from the St. Petersburg Police Department, the Pinellas County Sheriff's Department, and the Pinellas Park Police Department. This is for the criminal investigation. There still is separate and bifurcated investigations that are done by the Office of the State Attorney, and in the individual departments do their administrative investigation as well. But I'd be more than happy to answer any questions.
Chief, can you just contrast how it's being done today?
So currently, the Office of the State Attorney does their independent investigation, and currently, right now, the individual agencies were doing the criminal investigations of their own employees. I don't have any, belief that that I or any of the leaders in Pinellas County would shirk their responsibility, and we believe we were still doing very complete and thorough investigations and holding people accountable when necessary. However, we just don't believe that in today's day and age provides the level of transparency and impartiality that the public requests. So in the past, we would, if a Clearwater officer had used deadly force, the Clearwater Criminal Investigations Division would do a criminal investigation on that particular officer. This new one will essentially just create a new level of impartiality, move that outside of the umbrella of my leadership of the police department.
So this is just a proactive move by Clearwater PD and our partners.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Questions, comments? Councilmember Beckman?
Yeah, I have a few about this. Number one, who initiated it and why?
The sheriff had contacted me, post George Floyd incident. And I think as I previously testified to the council before, I think every responsible leader, when an incident like that happens, kind of looks internally for things that we could, improve. I think one of the reasons your law enforcement agencies are pretty progressive in Pinellas County is because we're always making these incremental changes based on our environment evolving. And so the sheriff had contacted me. We had had a conversation, me, him, and Chief Holloway. We kind of drafted an MOU together collaboratively, and then brought in the other chiefs and discussed it with them in the entire county. All of the Pinellas County agencies are supportive of this. There are 2 agencies that are using FDLE as opposed to this agreement, but I guess the sheriff's the one that dialed the first number, if that's your question.
Okay. And so the reason, like Largo police aren't listed. So I'm wondering, why aren't all of the police agencies within Pinellas part of this agreement?
Well, the only ones that aren't part of the agreement are Largo and Tarpon Springs. Tarpon Springs had already a contractual or MOU with the Florida Department of Law Enforcement to do theirs. And Largo recently entered into a similar one to use the Florida Department of Law Enforcement. I think the point would be that all agencies now are going to have an impartial entity doing the investigation. Those 2 chiefs have chosen to go down a different path in this particular format. One of the reasons that I'm more inclined or more supportive of this format is the current method of the Florida Department of Law Enforcement is able to do simply gathering the facts, and then they hand it back to the chief to make this determination. So to me, this system that we have is more effective because I'm not making that decision. So not only are these teams of investigators that are recused, that don't have affiliation with the involved officer, the leadership of the investigation is the one that's going to make any type of determination. So therefore, it has, in my mind, a higher level of impartiality.
Okay. Why was it signed already by all of the people involved, before we've had an opportunity to discuss it?
We felt time was relatively important. One of these could have happened yesterday.
Okay. And so I have a question. I did read it carefully and have a number of questions. So the composition, so if we're doing this to be proactive and to be transparent and accountable, I have a little bit concern of the composition of the task force, which is essentially, detectives from Pinellas County Sheriff's Office, St. Pete Police Department, and Clearwater Department, and 1 detective from Pinellas Park. And so it's oversight by peers. And we don't have anyone who's not affiliated with the police department as part of this task force.
I'm not sure what the question was. I guess my response to the statement would be many of the investigators for the Florida Department of Law Enforcement are retired Clearwater or retired Tampa police officers. So there is a community in law enforcement that's going to exist no matter what. So I don't know any. I think the value I see to this is that it's not internally controlled by the agency head. And the investigators that are doing the investigation are not affiliated with the department. I don't know if there's any system I could provide you that would completely 100% recuse or remove any type of affiliation. We have some, task force agreements with the Florida Department of Law Enforcement. We work with the Florida Department of Law Enforcement. We have task force with the FBI. We work with the FBI. So all those relationships all those relationships exist in the law enforcement community. So I'm not sure that there's going to be able to provide any type of complete absolving any type of relationship unless we fly people in from out of state on some some other agency that we're not having any direct contact with, which from a time perspective wouldn't be practical either. So I hopefully explain that, but I don't think I could provide any higher level of impartiality.
Councilmember Beckman, help me understand who you think ought to be doing it.
Yeah.
Well, I think if we had some third party, professionals that aren't working in law enforcement, I don't know if that would be, people from the, American Civil Liberties Union, if you had defense attorneys, if you had, I don't know. I mean, I'd have to do some research to find out what different oversight task force might be composed of. But to me, it's kind of a, it's a form of internal self-monitoring when you have police, law enforcement officials overseeing other law enforcement officials. And I get that they're not in the
From
same.
a different department?
I get it, but it's not a more outside objective set of eyes to look at things. That's all. I'm just making an observation.
Chief?
Yeah, I think I understand exactly, and I definitely respect that point of view. I think the part you might miss is that the people have to have the authority to charge somebody with a crime.
Exactly.
The ACLU would not have the ability to arrest an officer. Any of these independent third parties would not. So it has to be somebody that has jurisdictional authority to make an arrest. And in this particular county, that's either any of the Pinellas County law enforcement agencies through mutual aid can make an arrest on a felony. The Pinellas County Sheriff's Department has overlapping jurisdiction in Clearwater, so they can make an arrest. The state attorney can bring charges. The statewide prosecutor, the FDLE, and even the FBI would be more in civil rights violations, not necessarily in the charge of, say, murder. So it has to be someone with that authority to make an arrest. And I think what we provided you is probably the most impartial system that takes into account somebody has to be able to do the job. Yeah.
I'm just saying they could be part of the task force, another voice in that task force.
We wouldn't inject a third party group like that to a regular criminal investigation. So we wouldn't do it on an officer. So, we wouldn't do that on any other criminal case. So it would be, we are sworn and held responsible to be impartial. And I think, the investigation itself is very transparent and would be open for any of those parties to review and critique. And as we know in this business, they do.
Okay.
Pam, did you have something to add?
I think Chief Slaughter said it all, but this is a criminal investigation, not a citizens oversight, which is something completely different. So I think that, as the chief said, this is a criminal investigation, and we would not include civilians in that process.
Okay.
And in fact, it is confidential until completed.
Well, and there, I do have some other questions related to that confidentiality, I guess. And so if you've got minimum numbers for members. So if it can, but you can have additional members that make up this task force. So one of my questions would be, who makes the final decision on the content and findings and recommendation of the task force? Is it a vote of the majority of the task force members, or is it the supervising agency? Because it seems like it's the head of the supervising agency that ultimately makes all these decisions. The task force can recommend, but it's really one person, whoever that head of the supervising agency is, that's making final decisions, right?
I don't believe that necessarily would be true. I'm not reading every investigation and telling the officers when and when not to arrest. I would, in a case of this magnitude involving an officer-involved shooting, it would be a collaborative with the leadership in the investigative team, with the chief or the sheriff, whoever's leading the investigation, the lead detectives, And then you break out these things into organizational components where you have a detective that's responsible for the crime scene, and they all would participate in conversation to determine whether or not you get to the quantity of evidence. It's not a conversation about do we want to or not to want to charge people. It's a conversation about what evidence do we have and does it support a charge. And I think the other component that you're missing here is that there is a separate entity, the Office of the State Attorney, Bernie McCabe's office, that has his own team of investigators. He does his own interviews. He does his own evaluation of the evidence. And it's almost a secondary check and balance in itself on that decision-making process. So it's not just some chief or sheriff willy-nilly saying that, yay or nay, I want to arrest this person. I don't want to arrest this person. It's a very, complex, and it's once the investigation is complete, it's going to be public record. So any legitimate leader is not going to, be able to stand before you very long if he's making arbitrary decisions contrary to the evidence.
Okay, and then whoever brings the charges, is it the task force that's going to bring charges possibly, or the supervising agency? And then who pays for proceeding with the cost of pursuing that? Is it,
so, well, in these types of investigation, the state attorney could bring charges independently on their own. The task force on the investigation side would have the authority as well to bring charges on their own also. The cost of the investigative expenses based on this agreement are we basically all incur our individual own expenses. So if I'm the lead agency and I'm investigating the sheriff's department, I don't have to pay for the cost of the St. Pete detectives or the Pinellas Park detectives, but I am going to have to pay any overtime costs associated with my personnel while they're conducting this investigation, any crime scene costs that would be associated with this investigation. But then the inverse is if we have an officer involved shooting with a Clearwater detective or Clearwater officer, in the past, that would be a significant amount of overtime expense for us before that we would not have to incur in this particular time because we would be recused from it. So we don't have in this community or this county a significant number of officer involved shootings. Clearwaters are about 2 every 3 years. So it's less than 1 a year by just statistics. Fortunately, the exposure, I believe the cost is low.
okay. And just to be clear, the sole decision to investigate rests with one person, the agency head, right? So it says the agency head of the supervising agency or their command staff designee will respond to the task force. The sole decision whether an incident meets the criteria to activate the task force and have it conduct an investigation rests with the agency head or designee of the employing agency. So we've got this task force that makes recommendations, but ultimately it comes down to one person.
No.
No?
I already explained it. It would come down to the state attorney as well.
Okay.
They're separate.
Okay. Okay. Can you explain, there's a statement about the supervising agency duties that they're responsible for sending its detectives and supervisory personnel to the scene of the crime upon notification that this task force is going to be activated. Are they really supposed to get there at the time some kind of incident happens? Or is it just after to do some interviewing of witnesses and things like that?
Both. I mean, generally, when you investigate a major crime, you do start at the crime scene, and you would meet your team of detectives there. You'd get a briefing on what the facts are at the known particular time, and assignments would be made from there after the briefing, whether it would be to work the crime scene, whether it was to deal with the individual witnesses, conduct a canvass, take the suspect or officer involved and deal with that interview. So we would coalesce the team together for a briefing and a meeting, and there is a value to kind of having the ability to see and understand the complexity of the crime scene, especially in these particular cases.
But not, like if we're looking at the George Floyd incident, they wouldn't, so we've got this horrific incident that happened, and then somebody notifies the task force lead person that says, hey, there's been this incident, downtown here where there seems to be, there was a murder or a death, and we need to have an investigation. I mean, can you walk me through like how this task force would work in something like that, like the George Floyd incident?
Well, the only thing that's different is the impartiality component that we are injecting with this group. Other than that, it's a murder-death investigation. It's no different than any other death investigation we do, and we would start at the crime scene generally. There are certain circumstances where that may not always happen. The decedent's body is transferred to the hospital and you send detectives to the hospital instead. They're all a little bit unique based on the circumstances, but in an officer involved incident, in likelihood it's going to be, a deadly force involving probably a firearm or some kind of physical confrontation. There's generally going to be a scene that you would meet with your detectives. It doesn't mean that the lead agency could say, you know what, we're going to have a briefing at the Clearwater main station where the officer involved is because the body's down here and there's no scene or something. There's many circumstances that could occur. But for the George Floyd case, I absolutely would start at the crime scene. I would absolutely start canvassing as soon as I could to try to avoid losing any witnesses and obtain any video that was available from either cell phones or video from storefronts or any other areas. Obviously, identifying the officers involved, not just the officers, the four that were named very prominently, but any other officers that came to the scene afterwards, what they heard, what they saw. There's just a million things to do, and you would, the first goal, of course, is to secure that scene in itself and start aligning up the forensics processing that would need to be done. The forensic needs are going to be different based on whatever the circumstances are with the case.
But the task force detectives and officers aren't going to be there alongside with a city officers, are they? Like, they're not working parallel.
They would end up, they would secure my officers. If it happened in Clearwater, our officers are going to have to, just from a logistics standpoint, they were going to have to be the ones that secure the scene. But there will be a detective there out from outside the agency that will work with forensic processing that is not Clearwater employees as well, and they will maintain the integrity of the scene. So, yeah, I don't know what more I could answer on that. Yeah.
Okay. The investigating task force, they're not subject to FOIA? Can people FOIA information from their investigation, what they're doing?
The investigation is no different than any other criminal investigation. We're getting, I think, lost that this is an officer involved. It's a murder death investigation. It doesn't matter that they're an officer. It doesn't matter if it's assistant. All of the public records laws exist the same for the officer as they do for a citizen. It's no different.
Okay. I guess that's it. I think it's great to be proactive. I think it's important to be clear about the costs involved. But for me, one of the concerns is the oversight that I worry about, oversight that doesn't have more impartial third party involved. But
yeah, I could say state attorney again, but I think if that's not enough, I'm just sorry. I don't know what more I can provide you.
Vice Mayor.
Chief Slaughter, I just want to say, listen, I think it's great that you are proactive on this, and we have a great area. We've got great sheriff's department. And for this particular thing, which I think was different than what we had discussed before, I'm glad that everybody got together and put this together without having an outcry that we needed to do it. I think it's a great way that we can all work together on it. So thank you.
Councilmember Bunker.
I understand Councilmember Beckman's concerns. Those were things that should have been part of the citizens overview oversight committee, which we already discussed. But they are concerns that I think the general public has. I understand what this union is between the different police departments and the sheriff's office. And I think it's a very, very good proactive move. And I'm glad to see that you folks went ahead with that.
Anyone else? Councilmember Hamilton.
I guess I'm obligated to weigh in. No, I think the agreement here to have the various agencies involved, it does give an independent look to it. It gives an outside look. You know, there's a thing when you go to court, you're judged. If you have a jury trial, it's a jury of your peers. But this is a police investigation. Investigations are private. The information is private until the investigation is totally complete. And I think you want professionals in that area of expertise are the parties you want involved in it. Once the investigation is over, then anybody can dissect it and do whatever they want to it. But I think you need law enforcement to handle the specific area that this task force is charged to do. So.
Well, I think it's a good proactive step. I see that, you do have independent departments that are doing the investigation. I am not a conspiratorialist, so I don't believe that there is any, agreement between our different police forces to go lightly on an investigation. I think they're going to do their duty and do it in a way that's very honorable, complete, and something that the citizens of all of Pinellas County can be assured that's going to be correct. And if for some reason it isn't, as has already been said several times, you have the state's attorney that is also looking into the entire process. So I'm comfortable with this, but I don't know that I'm hearing consensus. Councilmember Beckman, do you support this or not?
I think, procedurally, I don't know if we could, well, I guess even if we consent to this, the public can still weigh in on Thursday, correct?
Somebody can always come and ask for an item to be taken off of consent.
Right.
The next item, even if we have consensus, I am asking not to put on consent because I want to leave it open.
Mm-hmm.
As far as I'm concerned, I support 6.1, but
absolutely, if
you want to keep it off consent, that certainly is your prerogative. Mr. Horn, do you have something to add?
Yes, Mayor. Watching law enforcement in action for the past 20 years, I understand the concerns expressed by Councilmember Beckman, but an underlying aspect of this is trust. And I have seen our law enforcement leadership time and time again reinforce the fact that they are professional and that they can be trusted to follow the law. So when they're making assessments, that is the context of how they go about administrating law enforcement in their agencies and this county. I also believe that expression of trust needs to bubble up to the elected officials and other administrators. We don't have that kind of trust that we have to have somebody else looking over the shoulder because we kind of maybe not really believe that we can trust because that third party isn't there. I think it does kind of create a level of concern, at least on my part, regarding how our law enforcement community who has the expertise, who can do their work with the understanding that there is at least a basic level of trust that exists among their elected officials. So I just have to say that. I understand the time we live in. I understand the questioning. I understand what's happening in some of the communities across the country, that have had struggles. I don't think that's necessarily an issue with us here in Pinellas County, and more particularly the city of Clearwater. We've been very transparent, and I think we're all committed to that. Thank you.
Councilmember Beckman.
I do want to say that for the record, I have trust in our police. I have had zero confrontations or evidence or interactions with the police that would cause me to question their ethics or their behavior, none. And I have heard virtually no reports of anything zero reports of anything that I think rises to any level of serious concern. But that's just me. That it has not affected me. I haven't been here that long. I don't live in multiple, I haven't lived in multiple neighborhoods in our city. And so I'm just approaching this as a third person, as a third party outside of this task force, and just saying, how in the vein of transparency and accountability, is there a voice that's not so intimately involved as part of the review process? That's all. I've been I'm a teacher. I'm part of the teachers union. I know about a grievance committee, and you've got that self-policing, and there is that aspect of, you account for each other. And sometimes if there's, anyway, I'm not going to berate it, but I just wanted to go on the record that I do have confidence in our police force, but I also believe in some policies with just a little bit of, some objective eyes, outside eyes. That's all.
Well, I would just point out that if the chiefs and sheriff had not come forward with this, we would be under the old program, which would be completely internal to the city of Clearwater. So to me, this is an improvement, something that is substantial that the citizens need to be aware of. And I do appreciate, Chief, the fact that you all proactively did this. So otherwise, we'd just all be going along our merry way and not questioning anything, or having this discussion. So Councilmember Beckman, do you want this to stay off consent?
No, I'm fine with it being on consent.
Okay, 6.2.
Approve an agreement with Exxon Enterprise Inc. of Scottsdale, Arizona in the amount of $2,217,407 for the 5-year period from August 6, 2020 through August 5th, 2025 for the purchase of body camera equipment, digital evidence storage and management, licensing and training in accordance with Clearwater Code of Ordinances Section 2.5641B, other government entities bid, increase the number of full-time equivalents within the police department by 1 position, and upgrade 1 officer position to police sergeant, and authorize the appropriate officials to execute same. Deputy Chief Gandy.
Actually, it's okay with you, Mayor, sir. It's going to be me, Dan Slaughter, Chief of Police.
All right, Chief Slaughter.
Round 2. So early in 2019, the police department did a request for proposal number 2918 for digital evidence management system. Based on the proposals that were evaluated, the Axon Enterprise company was selected as their preferred vendor, and the award was confirmed by City Council in February of 2019. And that agreement provided digital evidence management solution, but also supplied a common platform for many of our digital mediums. The program was also anticipated to be kind of a scalable foundational system if we were ever to implement a camera program or a body-worn camera program. In April of 2019, the council allowed the police department to incorporate the interview room cameras and the DUI cameras and even some mobile video and cruisers with Axon as well to further kind of promote that singular platform. On July 16 of this year, the City Council requested us to develop a proposal for a body-worn camera program for discussion purposes. And through that discussion or through that proposal, the police department recommends the product of Axon be the body camera program, which also seamlessly integrates with the digital evidence management system. The agreement in front of you includes 200 Axon Body 3 cameras, 25 docking bays, the storage and the licensing for the software and training to fulfill the council directive. The camera or the hardware and the purchasing prices were established through the National Purchasing Partners Contract, a national resource for public entities for similar public solicitations, which the City of Clearwater is a participating member. This is kind of a 5-year agreement that involves incorporating previous digital evidence management agreements and kind of putting them all into a singular package. So it includes not only the cost of the body cameras, but the cost of the support as well. The cost of the initial year of the body worn camera program is $566,957 with an annual reoccurring cost in years 2 through 5 of approximately $412,613. The police department simultaneously requested to add a senior police records clerk FTE and to upgrade a police officer position to a police sergeant position to manage the body camera program. This has an expense of $68,907, which the total therefore, not including the cost of uniform modifications, would be $590,463. The funding mechanisms for these, as previously discussed at the special project or special budget workshop, includes $175,000 from the special program of federal forfeiture fund. It also uses a blend of general fund and general fund reserves for the remainder $415,157. And some of the funding was already in our program. So the reason I lay all that out there is we already had some digital management contracts that has since they'll be upgraded to facilitate this program. So therefore, some of the funding is already in our operational budget. And so you'll see a little bit of an offset in that cost there. So I'm more than happy to try to answer any questions. I have Major David Dalton with me as well, who spent a lot of time trying to negotiate this arrangement. If you have any other questions that I can't answer.
Questions for the chief? Vice Mayor? You're still muted, Vice Mayor.
I'm sorry.
No problem.
Under the list, you have the list amount, you got a discount of almost 700,000. Is that because we, I know that you applied before for this, we got a discount that probably would go up in later months. When did they, can you describe what the discount is for?
Can you zero me in on the discount you're referring to, you're looking at?
Yeah, right on the last summary of payments. Let's see, page 7.
I'll have maybe David come up and discuss this. I believe this is just from consolidating all the other contracts together. And then of course, by kind of having this singular vendor relationship and platform, I believe they gave us price adjustments.
So Axon is formerly Taser International, right, Chief?
Yeah, so by having the Taser platform, the digital evidence management system, the cameras, the interview room videos, those are kind of package discounts.
Okay.
So
okay.
The way we jokingly refer to it is like buying your cable bill and getting a bundle.
Right. Okay. That's satisfactory. Thank you.
Other questions or comments? I think this is a big decision, obviously. We've talked about it at length at the last council meeting and also at the special budget workshop. But I would just soon, sorry to bring you back in, Chief, on Thursday, but I'd just soon leave this one off consent. Everyone all right with that? Okay. Item 7.1.
Approve engineer of record supplemental work order 2 to Atkins North America for $61,490 for Cooper's Point, increasing the work order from $173,940 to $235,430, and authorizing appropriate officials to execute same. Ms. Kessler.
Good morning, Mayor, council members. My name is Sarah Kessler, lead environmental specialist in the engineering department. Let me just give you a quick recap of the Coopersplay project, since several of you were not here when it began. The city completed the master plan in 2017 with the goal of improving water quality, wildlife utilization, and recreation opportunities in the Coopers Point area. The master plan came up with several great options, and a circulation study was completed to determine more specifics. This supplemental work order covers additional survey work needed for design and permitting. The actual project includes dredging of Cooper's Bayou, improve a few specific mosquito ditches on Cooper's Point, including the one under Patel Boulevard, creating an additional cut in the peninsula at the narrowest point, and creating a cut in the Courtney Campbell Causeway, similar to the one on the eastern side near Ben T. Davis Beach. All of these improvements, all of these will improve water quality and circulation and help with habitat utilization as well. The project also includes hiking trails, boardwalks, observation platforms, towers, and improvements to the canoe and kayak launch at Cooper's Bayou Park. Again, this supplemental work order is just for some additional survey work to help with permitting. Do you have any questions?
Any questions? Councilmember Hamilton.
The cut, you say we're going to make a cut at the most narrow point in Cooper's Bayou, and then another redo on Courtney Campbell's, similar to what they did over by Ben T. Davis. Does that portion of it is a DOT project, is it not? Or
we have talked to DOT, and they are comfortable with us managing the construction project on State Road 60. We have not talked about the specifics and have an interagency agreement yet. Like, we have not worked on that part of it, and it will be a very extensive agreement, I have no doubt. But they were comfortable with us doing construction at this point in time.
Okay.
Can you just explain for people at home what mosquito ditches are? It sounds awful.
So they're not actually named after the mosquito insect. They're named after the mosquito fish. And so they were dug in the 40s, 50s, 60s in mangrove areas. And if you look at an area of a mangrove, you'll see kind of a grid area, and those are where those mosquito ditches are. And it was to help those mosquito fish get back into the mangroves and control some of the other insect populations, control mosquitoes as well, but to be able to get mosquito fish in those areas. So they're just kind of a not nice word for ditch, I guess.
Very good. Well, this is a great project. It's a beautiful area for those who haven't been out there. And I thank you for it. Any other questions or comments? Consent?
Yeah.
Got a question.
Councilmember Beckman?
Vice Mayor.
I'm sorry.
Well, I had a comment.
Yes,
I
sir.
was on the Courtney Campbell board when they did the other one further east by Ben T, and that really clears up the stagnant water on the other side. It really did a great job of cleaning it up. So we look forward to seeing it doing the same thing here, because I know it's been an issue for a long time.
I wish there was some way we could get access up at North Beach into the Gulf, because back when the pass was open,
don't
the
get
water quality was
Yeah.
so much better.
Well, all you need is a shovel, because if I could dig a little shovel trench in that 30 feet that connects the beach to the bay, I think nature would take care of itself and open it back up.
I don't want nature to take care of it, because that usually means a storm. So, okay, consent?
Yes.
7.2.
Approve a deed modification for certain real property located at 41 Devon Drive, legally described as Lot 1, less the west 110 feet thereof, Block B, Columbia subdivision, extending the time period to commence vertical construction until August 26, 2021, and authorize the appropriate officials to execute same. Mr. Burzak.
Good morning, Robert Burzak, Real Estate Service Coordinator. The property at 41 Devon Drive was sold from the city to Decade Sea Captain for $425,100 on January 23rd, 2017. A stipulation on the special warranty deed granted the city a right to repurchase the property if vertical construction, if a parking garage was not commenced before the end of this construction commencement period. On November 1st, 2018, the City Council approved the modification of the special warranty deed to extend the construction commencement period to expire on August 26, 2020. Due to COVID-19 pandemic and its impact on construction financing, Decade has requested an additional 1-year extension on the construction commencement period to expire on August 26, 2021. The project has site plan approval and a development order. City management supports the deed modification. Any questions?
Any questions? Consent?
Yes.
All right, item 7.3.
Approve local mitigation strategy supplemental memo expressly not acknowledging the multi-jurisdictional program for public information is part of the local mitigation strategy, which was adopted by Council Resolution 20-18 on May 7, 2020. Ms. Kessler.
Good morning again, Sarah Kessler in the Engineering Department. In May, you approved the countywide local mitigation strategy, or LMS. The multi-jurisdictional program for public information, or PPI, is the promotion and marketing requirements in the CRS program. The PPI is included in Appendix H of the LMS, but to receive the CRS credit, the council must formally acknowledge that the PPI is part of the LMS document. I've attached a memorandum that clarifies the required acknowledgement. I also want to note that in the memo it's mentioned that the LMS also serves as the city's floodplain management plan. The city had previously written their own document, but since the LMS covers the same information as the floodplain management plan, this is an easy way to duplicate efforts, and we have been doing this for the last 8 years. So if you have any questions, happy to answer those.
Does everyone support our PPI and our LMS? Any questions?
No.
None? Consent? All right, item 7.4.
Approve an interlocal agreement between Pinellas County and the city of Clearwater and other NPDES co-permittees for water quality monitoring and assessment, and authorize the appropriate officials to execute same. Ms. Kessler, one final time.
Lots of acronyms this morning. We have, this is a 5-year agreement with Pinellas County for surface water quality monitoring. Water quality monitoring is a requirement for the city's stormwater permit. Pinellas County does most of the water quality monitoring throughout the county, and we pay a portion of the program cost based on the percentage of acreage that the city has within the county. Annually, the county provides a water quality assessment to me, and then I provide the specific assessment related to water quality in the city's jurisdiction in our annual MS4 report. I'm happy to take any questions.
Any questions for Ms. Kessler? Councilmember Hamilton.
Yeah, looking at the, how much we pay and how much each individual city pays into this program, I don't see the city of St. Petersburg. I see St. Pete Beach. I don't see the city of St. Petersburg. Do they not participate?
They do their own monitoring. They do not participate in the Pinellas County monitoring, so they do their own.
Interesting. Okay.
Other questions or comments? Ms. Kessler, since the entire county, and I believe Hillsborough too, has gone away from residential fertilizing by homeowners, how have the numbers improved? Do we have some actual statistics on how water quality has improved?
Those statistics aren't necessarily in this report. You can see how over time water quality has improved, but it isn't specifically measured in the summer months. Like they don't set it up to specifically look at what improvements there are summer after summer. It's overall how the watershed is improving overall. And so we do see improvement in our watershed with the limitation of fertilizers and all the other things that we do, street sweeping and all of those other things. And we definitely see an improvement since the fertilizer has gone into effect. The Tampa Bay Estuary Program has done several very specific sampling programs to look at the benefits of these fertilizer bans. And from that study, it is very easy to see that they are beneficial.
Okay, very good. Consent?
Yes.
8.1.
Authorize a purchase order with John Mader Enterprises, Inc., DBA Mader Electric Motors of North Fort Myers, Florida, to provide services to repair, replace, and supply utility plant equipment for an initial not to exceed amount of $300,000 beginning August 19, 2020 through May 2021, with the option of 2 one-year extensions at an annual not to exceed amount of $400,000, making the total value $1.1 million per Clearwater Code of Ordinances section 2.5641B, other government entities bids, and authorize the appropriate officials to execute same. Mr. Porter.
Good morning. David Porter, Public Utilities Director. I'm here this morning to ask you to authorize the purchase order with John Mader Enterprises, doing business as Mader Electric Motors, to allow us to purchase repair, replacement, and supply of utility plant equipment services from that firm. This firm has been doing work with us in the past. They've done a good job. They assist us with things such as pumps, booster pumps, different facilities, or equipment within our facilities, both on the water and the wastewater side. So if you have any questions, I'd be glad to answer them.
Questions for Mr. Porter? Councilmember Hamilton.
Yeah. The number, again, the number on this seems kind of small, because I know some of those pumps and some of those motors, if they go out, they're not, these aren't $2,000 motors. So it seems like these are relatively small numbers for if we have a real motor problem. But this is, historically, this is the number that is sufficient to cover what we need to cover.
For the Mader Group, yes.
Okay.
Keep in mind that this firm does work for us on equipment that is fairly generic in nature. There's other equipment that there are specified vendors that are the only authorized service facilities to do certain pumps, motors, in addition to these, screens, all kinds of equipment. So we have a number of these agreements with different organizations, depending upon whether they're an authorized service facility and therefore the only company that can do the work, or there's a generic company that can do the work. So we try to do as many as we can with the generic folks, obviously, because they're less expensive. So this is what we normally do with them.
Okay.
Other questions for Mr. Porter? Consent?
Yep.
All right, item 9.1.
Thank you.
Approve multiple vendor purchase orders as a result of invitation to bid 34-20, mechanical, electrical, and plumbing services for a total annual not to exceed amount of $4 million, with the option for 3 one-year renewal terms at the city's discretion, and authorize the appropriate officials to execute same. Mr. Wyke.
Good morning, Tom Wyke, Building and Maintenance Superintendent. Invitation to bid 3420 was issued on April 29, 2020 for mechanical, electrical, and plumbing services to be provided on an as-need basis throughout the city. 19 bids were received on June 2nd, of which 16 were responsible for the bid specifications. Bidders demonstrate a minimum of 5 years experience performing their respective trade and commercial industrial environment and submitted proposed hourly rates for their services. The evaluation resulted in a wage determination offered to and accepted by the following contractors. For mechanical, we have Air Mechanical, All Florida, Conserve, Kenyon Partners, Page Mechanical, Pure Air Control, and Tampa Bay Train. For electrical contractors, we have Ampro, Bates, Bada, Conserve, Piper, and Tamco. For plumbing, we have Alter, Apollo, Conserve, C. Lacey, and Ross Plumbing and Heating. Public Utilities Department and Building Maintenance Division manage numerous capital and maintenance projects which require the services of certified mechanical and electrical plumbing contractors. Having an established roster for each trade enables building maintenance to be proactive and responsive to many deadlines throughout the city, as well as facilitate public utilities maintenance and water and wastewater facilities in compliant operation.
Staff recommends approval.
Questions on item 9.1? I mean, this is a big contract. I just had a question about overtime because obviously these folks are going to get overtime, but you always hear about certain companies that do not charge overtime even on off hours. Is with a contract this big, is that something we could have negotiated into it?
Yes, we submitted the award recommendation with the various rates, and there are hourly rates, emergency rates, and standard rates that are on that. But typically, we try to do everything with a standard rate.
So I know you can't give me a number, but give me a
The amount of overtime.
swag at how many times it's overtime.
Typically, we don't use the contractors in overtime whatsoever. It's mainly our own staff that we typically use as overtime.
Okay. Other questions, comments, consent? Thank you. 10.1. Mistaken?
Yes, sir.
This
This
is just
would
our
be-
emergency proclamation. Any questions? Any questions on any of the second readings? City Manager, Councilmember Beckman, you're muted.
The second reading on 10.2, this ordinance to amend the future land use plan element of the comprehensive plan. I had a few comments or questions about that.
Okay.
Okay, let me see where. Well, okay, so is this the,
We saw this, I think it was at our first meeting
yeah.
for first reading.
Is
Correct.
this the mobile home park? Is that, yes, it is, right? Southern Comfort Park, correct?
Mhm.
Yeah. And so I had questions about, we're going from land use, residential urban, residential office retail, recreation open space, and preservation, US 19 corridor, or no, it stopped at preservation, to US 19 corridor and preservation. So what, can somebody just tell me what's happening there? What's going to
Ms.
happen
Clayton?
there? Yeah.
Sure, Gina Clayton, Planning and Development. This parcel was in Pinellas County, and upon annexation, we needed to assign the appropriate land use designations consistent with our comprehensive plan. We went through a major rezoning several years ago and rezoned the entire corridor along US 19 to our US 19 corridor. So this is just making this property upon annexation consistent with our land use plan.
Okay. So we're not planning to do anything with this mobile home park. People are staying in those homes and everything stays the same.
No, the developer has vacated the mobile home park. The residents moved out probably a year ago or so.
Okay.
In anticipation. There's also some sewer issues that are going to be cleaned up eventually when this park is ultimately redeveloped.
Okay. And what are you hoping to put there?
Well, the developer has not submitted any plans at this point. So I don't know what the intentions are.
How many acres is it?
It's 26.
Could light industrial go there? I mean, we're going to zone it for that, correct?
There's a variety of uses that are available to properties in the US 19 district. I believe this is in the corridor section of the district. And so without having the code in front of me, I can't tell you every use that is available, but it would be a variety of commercial and residential and potentially like light assembly and research technology type uses.
Okay. Is it leveled yet?
I think most of the mobile homes may have been removed from the site, but I haven't been by it in a while. But I know that the residents have moved out.
Okay. Is this the one that's by that Home Depot that's on, that's not the one, is
No,
it?
it's just north of Sunset Point on the east
Okay.
side of the road.
Okay. 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 That's what I had for that one. Thank you very, very much.
Any other questions on second readings?
I do, on the 10.4.
Okay.
Okay, so I have notes on, so there were multiple documents, so I'm just gonna find out where my notes are. Well, first of all, Ms. Clayton and I talked Friday briefly, but we were both moving around, or I was moving around, but what flexibility are developers or potential developers looking for? What kinds of things have come before you that warrants this flexibility?
Gina Clayton, Planning and Development Department.
Yeah.
Typically, we've had some issues with landscaping needs and also stormwater needs. We've had instance where someone actually, based on the configuration of the land, needed to actually have a smaller setback than what the code requires. And this amendment recognizes these. These are all generated by things that staff believes are important to help us better administer the US 19 code.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Okay, so on one of there's a section 3-1401, it's on page 2. It says the proposed amendment establishes city engineer approval of parking demand study methodology prior to commencement of such a study being used to support a request for flexibility. So can you explain that part of a parking demand study? What does that exactly mean?
It means that if someone believes that there are compelling reasons why they should not provide all the code required parking, that they do a study to demonstrate to us that there is sufficient reason for reducing the required parking, and we would like to have the city engineer involved in the scoping meeting. Typically what happens is we meet in advance, we agree upon the methodology that they're going to use to demonstrate why they don't need to have the full amount of parking that's required.
Okay, okay. And then right underneath that, there's section 3 where it says, the proposed amendment clarifies which temporary uses would be permitted within the US 19 district, primarily those which are allowed in the commercial district, as well as those which apply to residential uses such as block or neighborhood parties or garage sales. And then there was, something I read, at one of the other descriptors about like circus things and outdoor events that was kind of, were those like promotional things that retail would have along there that you want flexibility with?
What happened is when we developed and we implemented the US 19 zoning district, we did not amend the temporary use section to reflect this new district. So things that could occur along US 19 previously were not recognized in that amendment. So this is really a cleanup. For example, Clearwater Countryside Mall usually has an outdoor amusement event that they bring in. When we amended the US 19 district, we left that out. So now we're just trying to go back and make those things available again to businesses and residential properties prior to the rezoning.
Okay. And then at the top of page 3, it looks like, do you really just kind of want to align the two districts, downtown and US 19, and make them a little more similar?
Yes, we would like to have the terminologies very similar because it's the same type of form-based code. So we want to eliminate problems with staff having to remember it one way in one district and one in another district.
Okay. And then the one thing that I was concerned about too was the ability to limit the reductions. Well, it limits the size of reductions to walkways to 20% and requires a comprehensive landscape program application to reduce any required landscape areas. So, I mean, it is important to maintain as much pedestrian space as possible, right? I mean, they can only reduce it by 20%.
Right, it's a pretty small amount.
Is that what people really, developers, are they wanting to reduce that kind of pedestrian walkway and landscaping things?
Sometimes we've had a difficulty in accommodating development, redevelopment on the parcels, and we need to have some sort of flexibility to help them make a project occur. We've had instances where they just physically didn't have space to include, you know, the width. And so this gives us the option to work with them in those cases.
Okay. And then I just had one more thing on, well, I guess on page 5, I find it interesting that, you know, you're articulating, we begin to articulate criteria for text amendments, and you're citing the comprehensive plan, the goals, policies, objectives of the comprehensive plan. And one of them that jumps out is objective A.5.5, and it says promote high quality design standards that support Clearwater's image and contribute to its identity, which is fantastic. But I think, and this is where, you know, when I'm going to propose something for future discussions, it's like, what is Clearwater's image and its identity? And, you know, how are we articulating that? And are we all on the same page with that? Because here it's cited here in this document, comprehensive plan, it's cited in ULI reports. And I think it's important to have an idea what that is. How would you answer that? Like, what is our image and contribute our identity?
Well, I think some key things are quality landscaping, architectural design would be two things that come to mind when I think about high quality design standards.
Okay. And then under A.6.1.6, this is what I think is telling as well. It says land use decisions in Clearwater shall support the expansion of economic opportunity, creation of jobs and training opportunities, as well as the maintenance of existing industries through establishment of enterprise zones, activity centers, and redevelopment areas, and by coordination with the Chamber of Commerce, Tourist Development Council, and other economic development organizations and agencies. That's fantastic. But I would say, where is the articulation of protection of the environment and sustainability? And that's, you know, hopefully where our city can head and start to consider those things. So yeah, and that's all I have. Thank you very much for answering my questions.
Ms. Clayton, don't leave yet. Can you just explain a little bit for everybody, you know, our code and the fact that it is performance-based, the fact that we really are in a city that is redevelopment. We don't have any greenfield
That is correct.
areas. So can you just talk about how that differs from an area that is greenfield and how our code is performance-based?
Well, I would say that our code was put in place to recognize that we are in a redevelopment mode because we're mostly built out. As you said, I think we're about 97%, 96% built out. And so when the code was adopted in 1999, it included flexibility to recognize the difficulty of redeveloping existing sites and making them fit in based on the limited amount of land that's available. So a lot of our flexibility is design-based, and flexibility is allowed. For example, you can maybe have a reduced setback if you do a higher quality of landscaping design, or the architectural character of your project is better than, say, just any other type of development. So it's really about trying to maximize redevelopment opportunities, but also getting some sort of benefit in the process. Redevelopment, as you know, is very challenging. Land costs are high in an area like Clearwater, and we're competing with areas where there's a lot of greenfield, where development is much, I'll say it's just cheaper because you don't have to acquire land and you don't have to demolish buildings, et cetera, et cetera. So our code was put in place to really facilitate that, and I think you've seen that. We do have a little difference with the downtown district and the US 19 district. They're moving more into a form-based type code where it's very prescriptive. But what we're finding because we're still in a redevelopment area, sometimes you need some flexibility. And so that's what this ordinance is bringing forward to you today, to recognize the need for limited flexibility with the form-based code.
Thank you. Any other second reading questions? 11.1, Ms. Call.
Designate a council member to serve as a city's official voting delegate at the Florida League of Cities annual conference, August 14, 2020. Council members, the Florida League of Cities annual conference will be held over the Zoom platform, and they are requesting each municipality to designate a voting delegate. The annual business meeting will occur on Friday, August 14 at 2 p.m. And the individual will be voting on any leadership changes that they're going to be making, as well as the adoption of resolutions, which this year none are controversial. Are there any questions?
Any questions? I would be happy to do it, but I am going to be unavailable on that day. And you tell us there really isn't anything controversial, because sometimes there are. And I'd like to see all the resolutions before we cut somebody free just to vote for everything.
I will provide council copy of the resolutions. I'll get that from the city manager. I provided those resolutions back. But really, it's a resolution to honor the retirement of Mike Siddig. There's also a resolution to thank the current president, the mayor of Bay Harbor Islands. There's also a resolution supporting federal dollars to municipalities regarding COVID-related expenses. So at least up to this point, those are the only resolutions that have been submitted that I'm aware of.
Okay.
I will get that back to you. I've got it here.
All right. Thanks, Mr. Horn. Anyone interested in doing that on behalf of the city? Vice Mayor?
Well, I would be, but I will be out of town that date, so.
Okay. Councilmember Beckman? You're muted.
I can do it if I can do it. That's no problem. Unless somebody else really wants to, but it's fine. I can participate.
Okay. Very good. Thank you for doing that. Appreciate you stepping up. And if we could just see those before Thursday, so if there's any heartburn from anybody, we can at least discuss it Thursday.
I'll go ahead and attach it to the agenda item. Is it all right if I place the item on consent?
Yes.
That's fine. Okay, item 13.1. Ms. Aiken, did you have anything to add?
No, sir.
13.1 PSTA update, Vice Mayor.
Okay, just a few things. I thought it would be interesting to bring this forward on one of the boards I'm on. The PSTA, the League of American Bicyclists, recognized PSTA as a bronze level bicycle-friendly business award, being the first public transportation service in the state to receive this award. Was a great honor, and we'll continue to research ways we can be more beneficial to our biking community. As before, masks are always mandatory for riders, PSTA employees. Protect yourself and others from COVID-19. And last meeting, we voted for approving the first BRT, rapid transit, bus rapid transit leg that goes from downtown St. Pete to St. Pete Beach. And that is going to get underway real soon. We're real excited about that. We got grants from the federal government, also the city of St. Pete. And this is really the first leg of a 41. It's a 10.3 mile route that's going to give some relief to St. Pete Beach for employees. The idea is to get bus quickly to and from downtown to the beach, which I think it'll help a lot of our service industry personnel get on the beach. and other people back and forth. But it's the first leg of a 41 mile BRT plan to go all the way up to Wesley Chapel. And so we're real excited about that. The name of the bus will be the Sunrunner, and we've got a lot of art incorporated into the logo and also into the stops all the way out. It's a very nice project. So they're figuring that it'll be a 15-minute ride to get you from downtown to the beaches, which is better than a 35-minute ride that normally it would take. So, and let's see, in other news, PSTA has applied for funding this year, as they did last year, for the construction of our intermodal center. And the city has supported that idea. If we don't get it this year, we're going to go next year for it. And hopefully, I think in the next month, we're going to be talking about where we could, at least our council is going to be talking about where we're going to put City Hall, which will help PSTA plan where they're going to end up with their center. They're going to move from the downtown on the 500 block over. Their original plan that they have conceptual plans for is to move on the corner of Myrtle and 60. But until we discuss it, we'll have to see where the City Hall is going, and then at that point, we'll kind of discuss what we're going to be doing with PSTA as far as a definite site for them. The other one, our MPO, is Ford Pinellas, and we had Ford Pinellas is a unified MPO PPC, which is the Metropolitan Planning Organization, which has to do with transit, and also in Pinellas County is combined with the PPC, which is Pinellas Planning Council, which really has to do with land. So what we've done, it was a good thing to combine this, because now, since we are a community that's rebuilding itself, we can definitely find where it's good to plan for transit, as well as plan where our buildings should be. So it goes hand in hand, and Whit Blanton is the head of that. He's done a really good job with getting everybody on track with that. One of the things that's going to affect Clearwater with Ford Pinellas is the plan of our Complete Streets projects, which is Fort Harrison and Drew Street. And Drew Street is underway. We've got the DOT designing the engineering for that project, because we have three different, in the length of Drew Street all the way to 19 from downtown. You've got the city owning part of it, you've got the state owning part of it, and the county owning part of it. So DOT is, we figure probably by the beginning of the year, they'll have that complete. It'll come back to us if there's any changes that are made, and we can look at it again. But yeah, Drew Street has for a long time been a street that needs work done to it, because it's very restricted. It's a 4-lane street, and in some areas the transportation lanes are smaller than they should be, and it creates a real hazard. So anyway, that's begun, and I hope to be talking more about it toward the end of the year when we get the plan back from the DOT. So that's the two updates on the two boards that I'm on. And does anybody have any questions? And we try to get the information. I know that Brad sends the PSTA updates to all the council members, so you can see what's going on, and that's nice. But if you have any questions about either the MPO or PSTA, I'd like to talk to you about that and answer any questions.
Any questions for the Vice Mayor? Vice Mayor, so there's a lot of talk that potentially the federal government could have an infrastructure bill. as a way to stimulate the economy.
Yeah.
So PSTA does not have a shovel-ready plan still for downtown Clearwater. Is that what I'm hearing?
No, they did a conceptual plan. They got funding for the project, and they I think it was a year and a half ago, they gave the planning department a conceptual idea for now we're doing, it's more than a bus station, it's an intermodal center, and that's what we want. We want something that'll benefit not only the bus, but what's going to happen in the future with transit. And so the problem is now we've changed the downtown development plan, and our staff has to make sure that whatever goes on that site that's in the downtown plan, fits in that box. And so without really knowing, because as you know, we're talking about City Hall being one of the sites for City Hall is that corner lot. So we're not really sure where it's going to go until we vote and make a decision on where City Hall is going to go. But the funding for the actual construction, once our staff gets with PSTA and they figure out and then it probably won't happen until after we figure out exactly what lot it's going to go on, where they're going to put it. I still hold, as you know, Mayor, I own one of the key parcels in that block, and I sold that to the city, I guess it was about 10 years ago, before green light at your request or the city's request. So I'm really, my heart is make sure that we do put a intermodal center there. I mean, I sold it with that in mind. So I kind of have a little bit of a stake in this interest here myself. So I'd love to see that, not only for our bus transit system now, but I'm looking ahead when we have bus going to Tampa, and when people fly into Tampa International, that they don't have to take a taxi to Clearwater. I mean, we're part of the transportation system that comes to Clearwater, and that site on 60 is a great site for that, because it's on the way to the beach, and we could do some great things, park and rides and all kinds of things with that. So as we develop downtown, I see that part of our future, but we will have a chance to talk about that at future meetings.
Agreed. That has always been what we hoped for. That's why we bought it from the Times and bought your property and others. So Thank you for participating in that and also this update. So you also have the next item, which is the mooring mishaps in Mandalay Channel.
Now, I got involved with this a few months ago. Island Estates is one of Clearwater's neighborhoods. And we've seen some, over the last couple of years, we've seen more and more boats being moored in Mandalay Channel, and also on the south side of the causeway, just up from, they seem to be coming in and more people are mooring their boats. Now, Clearwater before, I think back in 2009 and before, we used to have some ordinances that we could put on boating in the community. And around 2011, the federal government had so many requests on different navigable water requests from different states. They finally just said, look, we're going to leave this to each state. Each state is going to be the trustee of their waterways. Well, as you know, Florida, that's what we do. I mean, we're a boating state. We have more coastline than any other state. So basically, the Florida legislature took over all navigable waters in Florida and said, municipalities, you're out of it. The only time you can make an ordinance for mooring or anchoring or any boating is if you own the land under the water. So we have some municipalities around us. Madeira Beach, I think, owns an alcove with, and they can put different ordinances on that. But pretty much the rest of Florida is left to open navigation. Now, listen, I'm a boater myself. I love boating, and if I'm going to advocate, I want to have something that's beneficial for both the boaters, because I understand Florida, if you open it to boaters, you don't want to have them, because I mean, you hardly know when you're driving from one municipality to another around here because everything's so dense. Can you imagine boating and going from one municipality where they may have conflicting ordinances? So I think what the state did is makes it a lot better for boaters, but with anything that like that happens, there's always unintended consequences. So we've seen more people mooring in Clearwater. I'm not talking about liveaboard moorings. I'm talking about derelict junk vessels that people don't want to pay to put it in a yard somewhere. So they go buy a Kmart anchor and they throw it out in the bay. So what happens, and what I can see from my house, is that the wind's blowing from the north, all these boats float to the south, dragging their anchor. And then if the wind's blowing the other way, they're going up on the north end. And frequently they break their anchor and they run into private property owners' docks, causing thousands of dollars of damage. So I'm kind of in the first stages of trying to get Tallahassee to do something that's beneficial for private property owners without taking boaters' rights away. And I've already talked to Chris Latvala. I've met with him. I've talked with Nick DeSigli about maybe sponsoring a bill this year. When I was in Tallahassee in January, there was a bill in a committee that never made it out, trying to deal with this. So I'm trying to get as many people around our area. I've been talking with Brian from the county, which he's got a group of people in all the municipalities in the county that have concerns, and see if we can put something fair and equitable for both sides of this issue, because it's I didn't realize it when I got into it, but it's a very contentious issue. And Clearwater actually had a hand in getting the state to change the ordinance back in 2009. There was a lawsuit in Clearwater, and that's on the books. I didn't realize it, that I guess the person that moored past the 72 hours won the suit, and they got, I guess, Tallahassee kind of changed their laws after that. But I think can be something that is beneficial to both, and I'll keep you up to date. It's going to be something that's probably going to it's probably going to take another 6-7 months, but we've started the ball rolling, and I'll keep you up to date with what's
Well, at a
happening.
minimum, we should have a resolution that on the books for the legislative session. I think we can also work with our other municipalities. I'll be happy to try to carry some water with the mayor's council throughout the county. It is a problem. We also want to make sure that those boats are being pumped out properly and not dumping sewage into the bay.
No, that's it.
That's a nightmare.
Yeah, there's a load of things I'd like to see that, I mean, if you have a boat and you dock it at the marina downtown, you're required to have insurance, because if you damage the docks somehow, who's going to pay for that? So I'm thinking if we need to have insurance, we need to have some kind of standard if you're going to moor for anchorage, that, if you have a 52-foot boat, you need this size anchor, because we don't want to be scraping up the seagrass back and forth as these things move around. There's a lot of issues that I think we can look at without being too restrictive on boats. I don't have a problem with people that come in that actually live aboard, that are cruising through and want, to stay for a week in Clearwater. But the people that are moored out there that we don't know if they're pumping out. I mean, Clearwater, actually has a pumping vessel for free that they'll run around and pump out, you know, people's boats for free. And but we don't see a lot of activity around the boats out in front of our place. So I don't know if that's being done, but that's a concern.
Ms. Call.
Council members, this would be a perfect item for our legislative agenda as we begin to prepare for the next legislative session. So in lieu of a resolution, I think we should start working on that. Vice Mayor, if you're available, I would love to set up a call with our lobbyist, and if Pam is available as well, so we can start that if you're looking more at a state legislative bill. Also, that'll give me some background so I can help you present the item for the Florida League of Cities. If it is really something statewide, I need to start working that angle with the staff so we have more support in that regard.
Thank you. Yes, I'll be available.
Other questions or comments from the council? Councilmember Hamilton.
I think there's a couple things. Number one is I think the potential is there for this problem to get even greater, just because with the pandemic, a lot of people had a lot of spare time, free time on their hands that they hadn't anticipated, and boat sales and boating has become much more prevalent in our area. Now, when people start going back to work and doing things and they don't have time to use the boat as much as they have before, they're going to be looking for, what do I do now? The potential is there for more of this, but along the lines of what the Vice Mayor said, because the Vice Mayor lives just a couple houses away from one of my brothers, and my brother has a good friend who's a former military diver, and whenever he's in town visiting my brother, he'll go for a scuba dive off of my brother's dock, and he comes back and tells my brother that, if you believe these boats out here are properly disposing of their waste, you're nuts, because the bottom land in our bay is covered in waste. And, I'm not really looking forward to putting on a wetsuit and going and checking it out myself. I take this gentleman at his word, but, we have got to be able, the legislator or somebody, we have got to be able to have control of our waterways to make sure these boats are maintained properly, discharging their waste properly, and whatnot. Right now, our hands are tied and we don't have a whole lot of options, but we've got to hammer common sense into Tallahassee and say, this is out of control and we've got to get our arms back around it.
I've got a question for Pam. Pam, one of my papers I got was ordinance 9383-20. I don't think it's been signed yet because we haven't been brought to council. It is a ordinance of the city of Clearwater relating to the regulation of derelict vessels. And I know we had an ordinance before. This one looks like it's been modified, but I'd like to bring that, if that needs to be discussed at council, let's go ahead and put that on an agenda and bring that forward.
Councilman, that is on the agenda, but not for this meeting. I believe it's for the second meeting in August.
Okay.
So we do have it scheduled.
Did you have anything to add, Ms. Call? Just what Pam said. Thank you. Any other questions or comments on this item? Okay. 13.3, I mean, we are due for a break, but this is really the last item. So can everybody hang in there?
Yep.
We've had several issues recently that, citizens have wanted to meet all 5 of us on. And I'd like to just discuss real quickly how we want to deal with this. First of all, I am not trying to limit citizens' contact with council members. What I do want to limit is confusion from a bunch of different answers coming from different people and maybe different promises. So we had the drainage issue up off of Drew and Highland. And now we've got the Crest Lake Park and the dog park issue, which we have a constituent that wants to meet with everybody. And I just want to make certain that there's some coordination and communication, which we cannot have together because of sunshine. But I want to make certain that, first of all, we're going to give citizens realistic expectations, and also that they're getting consistent information. And I think sometimes when we have a bunch of different people going out, and then they latch on to a different council member, perhaps, who they feel more comfortable with, it is fraught with potential issues. And I don't have a solution, but I want to at least discuss it and get your viewpoints. Any Vice Mayor? You're muted.
Yeah, I think everybody should feel comfortable that they can meet with who they feel can bring something forward for them. But I don't know if they need to talk to every council member. I don't think that, because sometimes it's easier for one council member to relay information back, and then if another council member gets it explained to him in a way, and then he might say something else. I agree with you. I think it would be better to have a point person, maybe through the city manager, that can answer questions that way. I mean, we could maybe respond what our concerns would be, and then have staff, which ultimately they're going to be the ones that are going to probably take care of whatever it is that they're complaining about. So I'd like to see what Mr. Horn thinks of that.
Thanks, Vice Mayor. There are two things that surface as a result of this process. First is items that are policy in nature. What I always try to do is to get you all involved in a discussion to address the policy issue. Because sometimes people who disagree with administrative decisions really are questioning the policy upon which the administrative decision is based. And it's usually, in our code and that sort of thing. So that's the first thing. So I think we have a good way of pushing that in front of you and working with whoever is complaining to at least frame that, so that you all as a collective body can get your hands on it. The other issue is something that is occurring. I can't say it's more frequently, but it certainly feels that way. Is when our citizens simply disagree with an administrative decision that is based on our code, and they don't accept the answers, and then they take it to you all, and that's where you may get everybody gets a bite at the apple because the individual wants to meet with all of you. And if it's in writing and it comes to all of you, then the mayor, based on your council policy, responds on behalf of the council. So we have a way of kind of addressing this if it comes to you in written form. What we don't quite have nailed down is what the mayor was talking about, is when people schedule a meeting with you. Now, how do we facilitate that? Do you still want the mayor to respond, even though you all have had a meeting with that particular group? I don't think the council policy really kind of addresses that dynamic. You could amend the policy to, again, require the same sort of reaction, even though you have a meeting with the mayor, and obviously if the mayor has a meeting, then the mayor can still respond on behalf of the council. And of course, you all are made aware of what that response is. So, Vice Mayor, that's kind of how I see it. I think things that are written, or I think we have a policy process that kind of addresses that. things that occur because of individual meetings, it's not quite as nailed down. Now, all of this assumes that all of you support the mayor responding on behalf of you. So if there is an issue that is near and dear to your heart and you feel like you've got to respond, then it blows up the whole thing, and you may want to look at having a policy that kind of addresses that. When do you follow suit with the policy, or what kind of provisions would you allow a council member to go off on their own and just respond because they feel like that they need to?
Well, that's why I was saying perhaps going through you is the best way, because the mayor cannot talk to me or any of the other councils talk to me. Everybody goes through you. And you would know if there's a consensus or not. So I don't know. We need to be able to be accessible to people without, it's hard with the sunshine law to do that without responding and saying something that's going to conflict with somebody else. So, and then I understand the can of worms you get in at that point, because who's right? It's the person that agrees most with the person that has the complaint. So,
well, I might add with the Becca K situation, I'll just use that as an example. I know she met with all of you, but because we were involved with all of the principal property owners, then we could then go ahead and wait until that meeting process with you all had finished, then come to you at a council work session and lay out what the solution was. And so then you could then react to it. I think that kind of worked out, but some of the other things are not as simple. We've got an issue, right now involving Crest Lake Park and the dog park. My intention is for us to complete the project and not be interfered with until that's done. But you all have received meetings with one individual, and I think that person has an expectation that somehow there's going to be a council discussion of the dog park renovation, and that's not my intent, at all. But I don't know if some of you feel differently about that. But so Mayor, I don't know whether I've complicated what you're trying to accomplish, but at least that's my response.
Well, first of all, I think there ought to be a process if there's a dissenting view within the council, because we're not going to agree on everything. I think at some point it would be good to have a discussion, not only for the council, but also for the public, to better explain what our roles and responsibilities are within the city, because I think a lot of times people are confused that we have a council manager form of government. I get emails oftentimes, and you all see all of them, but people believe that we have a strong mayor form of government where, first of all, I am administrating on a daily basis, and secondly, that I can make unilateral decisions. Mm-hmm. And we all know that that isn't true. And so to me, that is a part of tempering and clarifying what the expectations of citizens should be. Because I want to meet expectations, or I want to exceed their expectations. But when they don't understand sometimes what the process is, it makes it a lot more difficult. And so what I'm trying to do is eliminate some of the ways that we're probably going to get crossways with people, because if they're coming to all 5 folks, we may just have even slight deviations in what we think ought to go on with the project. And, as Mr. Horn said in an email, do we want to try to design certain things by committee? I've found that often doesn't work very well. So I'm just trying to get feedback from everybody as to what they're comfortable with and ways that we can make this a more effective and efficient process. Ms. Sagan.
Mayor, I believe that Ms. Call has established in a coming meeting a discussion of the council policies. I'm not sure when that is. I believe it may be the next meeting. And this is something that is addressed in that policy and probably needs some expansion. We do not address the meeting issue at all. That one is a new issue. We do address responding to letters, and dissenting voices do have the ability to respond separately if they wish to. The council members can individually respond. There are some other issues that I think we need to address, and outlining those rules a little more clearly, I think, is important. And I think defining the roles, you raise an excellent issue. I think that would be important to also address in the rules. What happens or how we can assist you. For example, one of your the meetings or discussions that you've been having address things that would have been very helpful if you'd had some background. And when I say you, I mean all of you, from staff before you began having the meetings. But staff didn't have an opportunity to provide that information. So I think when we have that rules discussion, that's definitely some things we need to clarify.
And maybe that's the appropriate time to expand this conversation, but I wanted to put it on the table now so that at least everybody could be thinking about it. I'll leave it up to all of you as to when you want to have that discussion, but that probably would be the appropriate time. Any other input from anyone? Councilmember Beckman?
I found it, I think you raised some real valid concerns. Obviously, I like to interact with the public as much as possible. But I worry about when an individual meets with each one of us individually, what's being communicated. And, I try to listen, I listen and take notes and try to understand. And then I go back to staff for clarification and usually say, well, let me check with the city attorney or whatever, and try to understand more and put a professional opinion back on staff, because I'm not a professional in those different areas. But I don't know if this is in alignment with sunshine laws, but for example, the Crest Lake Park gentleman and his concerns, and I met with him out at Crest Lake Park and then followed up with an email that articulated, what I understood his complaint to be, what we saw together, and what action I was going to take and, suggested. And not like I was going to take any action. It was just basically I said, I understand your concerns. I can sympathize with them, but I advised, since all the work was done, let's wait and see how it works out before we presume that it's going to be awful or not what he expects. And so you all were privy to that. And if we're having individual meetings with people, and there was another woman out for the assisted living out by McMullen Booth, perhaps if we follow up with a short email that then gets circulated as in, this is a summary of our meeting and what we said. Is that appropriate?
Pam, you want to weigh in on that?
You cannot interchange with each other or have discussions with each other, even if it's by email. Now, what you did, which is just a synopsis of your conversation with the person you met with, is not a problem. However, if it generates discussion between the council members that's not in a public meeting, that is a problem.
Mm-hmm.
So you can't exchange back and forth with each other by email.
But that would be a means of understanding, or hopefully that we're all kind of on the same page as far as we listen and then we defer to staff. We direct any of those clarifications to staff. And then for me, I don't want to be the intermediary between a resident and a staff's explanation. I pass it off on the staff to do an explanation.
So out for the ALF, for instance, I had been there the day prior to you. I'm sure they told you that. And I generated a whole list of questions that they had given me from their packet to give to staff. And staff is still working on a response to that, but what I saw, and this isn't the only example. We have other examples over the last couple months with different council members who've been approached by different people. But there is a different person that is contacting you, Councilmember Beckman. And then there's a different one that's been contacting me. And what I'm just concerned with is just that, we have a unified message from the city that at the end of the day, when the staff has really completely analyzed the situation, that we can give them back a unified response. And again, so their expectations are realistic as to how the process is going to unfold. So, and I think the rest of us are meeting with the gentleman from Crest Lake Park this week. So, Councilmember Hamilton.
Well, I think, again, using Crest Lake as an example, as we went through that process for the Crest Lake redesign, there was a series of multiple public meetings, and the public were able to give their input and everything else. And I think we all know Ms. Siskin, Joanna Siskin. She was highly involved in it, and I was actually having a conversation with her the other day about the gentleman we're meeting with now, and her response was, well, where was he when we were having all these meetings to design Crest Lake? Because she's very happy with the way Crest Lake is coming together and the design of it and everything else. And she had no idea who this guy was. So there's always going to be, people who are going to not like something or whatever. But I think what it really cuts down to is we are the policy makers. We establish policy, we approve projects and things like that. But once we vote on it, it falls into Mr. Horn's lap, and our very professional city staff handle it from that point on. So, I'm not sure we're the ones that need to be, talking to citizens about redesigning or redoing minor modifications to something we've already approved. I think then it falls into the administration, into an administrative vein, and that's not our job. Our job is not administrative. So I just, I understand where people are going, and we're the, our names are out there, and they want to talk to us, and I don't have a problem talking to people, but sometimes people's expectations of just by having a conversation with us, they think that they're gonna get what they want just by talking to us. And it doesn't happen that way, and not everybody understands that.
Well, that goes back to the expectations, and I think upfront, for instance, when I talk to the people about the ALF out on McMullen Booth, the fact that project had already gone through the CDD, I explained that we have different levels of approval, some that come all the way to the council, some that do not. That particular project does not rise to the city council, and tried to temper expectations. I certainly was sensitive to some of the things that they're concerned about, and think that, we may be able to help minimize the negative impact in their viewpoint, but at the same time, it is also understanding the process and what can and cannot be done. So, and ultimately, citizens are going to come to their elected officials before they go to staff for the most part, because they're our employer. So Councilmember Bunker.
I understand the importance of a unified voice, and I agree with you on that situation. In the case of Becca Kay, she came to me, and I went out and met with her and took along a video camera, shot some video, got some information from her, and then put it on a private link on YouTube to share with the city. And I used the process that I've used all along, which is somebody approaches me with a problem, I turn to Mr. Horn and ask which department would handle this, what can be done, if anything. And as far as, and I think that works well. I mean, almost everything that I've turned over to Mr. Horn has been addressed in one way or another. When I see a citizen scheduled to meet with all of us, I assume that's something that the city wanted to happen. Same way that when I see like the assistant living center, or there's a businessman who wants to do something with the beaches and exercise equipment, is meeting with all of us. And I don't see why a business person would be scheduled to meet with all of us, but we'd say, no, a citizen can't be. I don't know if it's the most efficient way to have every citizen who wants to meet with all five of us, because frankly, everything that was discussed in the dog park conversation that I had, it was nice to meet the fella and put a person to all the email exchanges that we've been reading about this. I mean, all the information I had already received in the emails. That doesn't mean I don't want to talk to people, but I think the city has to look at what type of setup we want to use.
Well, at least we've had this opportunity to discuss it and put some context to it. And as we talk about the council policies in our next meeting, if everybody could just put their thinking cap on, and we can discuss it further at that time. Okay? Anything else from any of the council members? Councilmember Beckman and then the Vice Mayor.
Okay, so are we on item 14, new business, items not on the agenda?
Correct.
Okay, so I would, you know, I know that we've had some marathon meetings, and we don't want to duplicate those marathon meetings necessarily, but I would like to think of some ways that we can creatively get to know each other better, because with COVID, you know, I never get to see you all or have any conversations about philosophy that aren't, you know, in public view. We have limited time, and I you know, respect the sunshine law. So I would ask that you could think about, what if we put on our work session agendas, and maybe it's just one a month or something, like a 20-minute allocation of time to talk about our personal philosophies related to different things, whether it's, you know, what are our personal philosophies related to citizen engagement, and kind of like the discussion we just had. Or we could, how are we going to approach strategic planning and those priorities? I'm really interested in what your feelings are about a community identity, a sense of what is Clearwater, what is our community identity. It's referenced in our codes, it's referenced in the ULI report, and this need to develop some kind of cohesive unity throughout our really diverse city. And I'd love to know what your, you know, the thoughts are on that as we move forward in making some decisions or giving guidance about the development of Imagine Clearwater and Coachman Park. And so anyway, that's just a suggestion. You can think about it and see if it might be something you're open to, or other ways that we can have just some candid get to know you conversation. But it relates to how we approach decision making and priorities in our city.
Well, I will tell you, it's a shame the way COVID has changed a new council and really getting to know one another a little bit better. Normally, we at least eat together before council meetings. With Miss Aiken in our presence, we're not talking about anything having to do with business, but we are talking about families, background. So a lot of that team building just hasn't occurred that normally does. And that's kind of a tragic result of COVID-19. You know, because we ran in different seats, but we ran together. You know, one of the things that I promised was going back and revisiting the strategic plan for the city. And that kind of starts with some meetings between the city council that does exactly what you're asking for.
Yep.
The problem is it's really going to be difficult to go out and take the next step of talking to citizens in mass and finding out what they think and what they desire for, you know, the next 5 years of Clearwater, and have it be safe. And I mean, I think we're doing a pretty good job with the virtual, but it isn't the same.
No.
It's not the same as being with somebody in a room and seeing their body language, you know, looking at charts or looking at visuals and everything else, and really getting people's opinions on things. And so I think maybe one of the things we have to decide is, do we want to hold off on that so that we have a better process, or do we want to start to go forward and maybe not have as good a result, but at least have some of the conversations? I would be happy to have a separate work session that just gives us an opportunity in the sunshine. I would rather have it be separate, Councilmember Beckman, than during a normal work session or a council meeting, and literally start to flesh out some major areas and give one another's philosophy on those areas. I mean, I know the environment, for instance, is very important to you. I think it is important to all of us at different levels. I think if we could pick maybe 5 to 7 different broad categories of topics that we could discuss and have a special council meeting, rather than starting the visioning and strategic planning process, this would at least give us a baseline for better understanding one another and where, you know, our philosophies are.
What I think might work with that too, and maybe this is coming from my background as a teacher, is if we can, you know, if we find an article or a, you know, a template that we think represents, you know, something good, we can share that ahead of time so that we're coming to the table with at least some foundation of examples or talking something to start the conversation that we've all had, you know, experience. So we've read these 4 or 5 different articles that any one of us could choose to attach to the agenda. And now we come to this meeting with at least a starting point, instead of just like, well, who wants to start and what are we referencing? I don't know if that's ever been done before, but to me, that seems like a good way to approach something like that.
Well, we've had council members bring articles that they think are pertinent to the city on specific topics. A lot of that used to be generated by participating in the Florida League of Cities or the U.S. Conference of Mayors, things like that. I would often bring things back from the U.S. Conference of Mayors that we would discuss, maybe a program that somebody else is doing and how it worked well, and then also some of the pitfalls. But I think we could start with a meeting that maybe talked about, you know, some primary subjects. I mean, one of the things that I've asked Mr. Horn and I want to put on the agenda is I still want to talk about some of our planning and zoning issues, specifically where two zones meet. I continue to believe that is one of the areas that we have had issues. If you look at the storage project off of Duncan, if you look at the condominiums off of Edgewater, if you look at, you know, the hotel down on Clearwater Point, and then you talk about this ALF backing up to a residential area. I think those have been where the conflicts have been. And we did address that on North Beach as we kind of reduced intensity and density as we worked towards the Acacia Circle back in the day. But I think it's worthy of a discussion because when it's a zoning area that's in the middle of a like zoning area, we tend not to have issues. It's when two zonings collide that we do. And there's some other topics. So.
Yeah. When you talk about the strategic plan and do we want to put it off because we can't get enough community input, I think that's a valid concern. But I mean, I think, you know, revisiting that strategic plan and improving it is critical. And I don't want to put it off for too long. I am aware that Largo has sent out some kind, I think they're in the beginning stages of revisiting their strategic plan, and they have sent out digital surveys to residents, and you know, and I don't know what our response rate has been on some of those kinds of things, but I just, you know, if we're not going to be meeting until there's a vaccine, and it gets distributed and administered and all that stuff, I don't, you know, I don't think we should put this off until the middle of next year or something like that. I don't know.
Okay. Did you have anything else, Councilmember Beckman?
No, I think that's good. Thanks.
Okay, Vice Mayor.
Yeah, I wanted to talk about when we will be discussing aligning Clearwater with the new countywide development code. I know that came, they changed that the end of last year. I thought we were going to act on it after the first of the year. I understand that it's in, staff is looking at it now, but I don't really know where we are with it. I think it's something that we need to be discussing because it could hold us back for some development that we're looking for with an RFP for Magic Clearwater. And, you know, staff has told me, well, we don't really need to do that because right now we can, if somebody asks us, we can make something work. But, you know, a lot of times when a developer's looking at a project, they aren't going to call the city. They're just going to look at the code and see what will be allowed and what won't. So I'd like to have that brought up where we can discuss it and get an update on that and see if we can move forward or what the problems are, why we're not moving forward.
Okay, we can agenda that. Anything else?
That's it.
Councilmember Bunker or Hamilton? Councilmember Bunker.
Just going back to Council Member Beckman's suggestions that we get to know each other better. I don't know if this is tabled too because of COVID-19, but I know there had been talk about a retreat for all of us, not traveling to Tahiti, but getting a boardroom or something in town here, so we can just gather and get to know one another. So I just wanted to throw that out there. It sounds like a good idea at some point.
I think that's the discussion more or less on philosophy, and I think we can agenda that. What I want to kind of do is narrow it down to some specific topics, you know, maybe 5 to 7 different topics that are kind of overarching themes that we can talk about. I mean, I think that would include development, business, how we interact with other agencies, what we believe the responsibility of the city is versus our partners, because we often partner with other organizations to accomplish a task the city believes is important. We used to say we don't have to do it all, we just have to make sure it gets done. Which means that sometimes we can partner with somebody else who has better expertise in a specific area, but we can help facilitate or support. You know, so I would think environmental issues would be something that we could talk about, social issues. So, you know, there's 5 or 7, I think, really big topics that if we sat down and went through those and understood people's philosophy, we'd have a much better understanding of one another, and it wouldn't be something you could get done in an hour. Does that sound reasonable? Okay. Anything else? Ms. Aiken, Ms. Horn, you good?
Yes. Yes.
All right. With that, we are adjourned. We'll see you all on Thursday night. God bless.